For decades, Bigfoot has lived between rumor and fear. Giant prints in the mud, a scream in the night, shaky footage that makes your heart race. Those images sell stories. They also hide a single, odd detail most documentaries and tabloids sweep under the rug. Bigfoot almost never harms children. That isn't a one-off or a lucky break. Across the Pacific Northwest and the Deep South, in rural hollows and mountain clearings, the pattern repeats. Witnesses tell of toddlers returned to sleeping parents, of small feet found inside a ring of enormous prints, of children left untouched near a camp, while adults report being watched from the trees. Survivors speak of gentle approaches, not attacks. Indigenous elders whisper of the same rule in council fires. Archivists and field notes private, redacted, sometimes sealed record it again and again. This is not background noise. It is a rule. Tonight we will pull that rule into the light. We will show you why Bigfoot seems to spare children and what the evidence says about how that protection works. This is not a sentimental tale. It's an urgent, practical revelation. You will hear from trackers and retired wildlife agents who have spent years in the field. You will hear from elders who treat these encounters as part of a living code. You will see the physical oddities researchers have cataloged: hair and tissue samples, acoustic patterns, things that point to a consistent behavioral response. Most important, by the end you will understand the mechanism behind the protection and the single critical mistake adults make that can turn a guarded situation into a dangerous one. We will trace the pattern from stories told around fires to lab notes tucked away in private vaults. We will connect eyewitness detail to measurable data, strange proteins in some tissue samples, vocal shifts recorded during child-related encounters, and repeated track patterns that look less like hunting and more like containment. We will lay out how social learning among the animals what looks like. Teaching may have fixed this behavior across generations, and we will reveal how some human institutions, curious or fearful, have quietly tried to study and sometimes to weaponize that same codephin, choosing secrecy over public knowledge. If you care about the safety of children or about seeing the facts clearly, this matters. The more you understand the hidden rule, the less you will confuse protection for harmlessness. There are signals to read and rules to follow. There is one simple behavior adults must avoid if they want to keep both themselves and the child safe. Listen closely. What follows will change how you read every report of a child in the woods. You might expect this to be folklore campfire stories dressed up as science, but if we ignore the pattern, we also ignore a mass of consistent testimony and physical evidence gathered over decades by people who don't trade in drama. Trackers, retired wildlife agents, independent biologists, and local rangers who have spent entire careers in the places where these encounters occur. The reports keep pointing to the same odd detail. Children are treated differently, again and again, in ways that cannot be explained by accident. Start with the field notes. I've read pages of them, handwritten logs kept by once respected field teams, private research groups, and a surprising number of whistleblowers from security programs that operated in remote forests. These notes aren't headlines, they are methodical. Dates, GPS coordinates, descriptions of tracks and shelters, sketches of vocalizations, and repeated annotations next to encounters with juveniles. One partially redacted memo even sums it up plainly: non-aggression toward juveniles observed repeatedly. Further interaction constrained by ethical concerns. Different writers, same conclusion. Then look to people who have lived with this knowledge for generations. Indigenous elders across several regions describe beings of the woods that leave children unharmed, sometimes even guiding them home. These are not fantasy tales told for tourists. They are oral histories with practical rules, rituals, gestures, and taboos developed around a recurring behavior. Anthropologists who have worked alongside these communities note that the stories are consistent enough to be treated as real-world context, not myth. Elders teach children how to act if a forest presence is nearby. They teach restraint and respect. That cultural memory matters because it marks this as a long-observed interaction, not a modern invention. Scientific fragments back up those accounts. Private labs that have analyzed hair and tissue collected at sites tied to child encounter reports found unusual patterns in sensory-related proteins, particularly those tied to smell. Acoustic specialists, using recordings pulled from field devices, have documented changes in vocal behavior when high-pitched human sounds are present. Calls soften, cadence shifts, and what researchers describe as non-contact tones appear. Experienced rangers report behavioral displays that look like containment rather than predation. Tracks forming a perimeter. Cleared ground left like a small sleeping nook, animals maintaining distance but keeping a watchful presence. None of these data points alone proves a rule. Taken together, though, they form a demanding set of facts. Indigenous testimony gives historical continuity. Field logs supply repeatable incident patterns. Biological assays point to sensory sensitivity. Acoustic files suggest species-level recognition. Law enforcement and wildlife officers add operational context. they sometimes respond to encounters, and their reports echo the same central thread. The result is not a scattershot set of oddities, it's a pattern that calls for explanation. There is also a sober side to this story: secrecy and suppression. Several retired technicians and researchers have come forward with accounts of restricted archives boxes of tapes, sealed folders, samples cataloged in private facilities. In a few cases, teams who tried to publish findings or share media were advised to hold back, for reasons ranging from ethical concerns to murkier claims about human safety and national security. That pattern of redaction suggests one more fact worth noting: the phenomenon has been taken seriously enough by institutions that they chose containment over disclosure. So, where does that leave us? Not with certainty, but with responsibility. The weight of testimony, scientific, cultural, and operational, requires an explanation that goes beyond myth or chance. There is a consistent behavioral code in play, observed by those who have the most to lose by being wrong. Understanding where that code comes from and how it actually operates in the field is the next step. It's the step that separates rumor from knowledge, and it's the step we'll take next. Before we state the rule outright, you need to see how the strange pieces fit together. Think of them as three puzzle shards: scent chemistry, acoustic frequency response, and culturally transmitted behavior. Each one is interesting by itself. Taken together, they begin to look like design. Start with scent. Multiple independent labs, working off privately, collected material have found something unexpected in samples taken where children were reported: an unusual concentration of proteins tied to olfactory detection, and a consistent signature of volatile organic compounds that match chemicals produced by very young humans. These aren't vague guesses. The compounds show up in infant sweat, in the oils of baby skin, even in the microbial byproducts of a juvenile microbiome. In controlled tests done not in national labs, but in smaller, ethical primate facilities, materials that mimic those juvenile odor profiles reliably lowered agitation in primate subjects. The animals would relax, stop pacing, sometimes adopt a posture researchers called quiet watch. Field technicians who later compared those lab results to footage from remote cameras say they saw the same microbehaviors in wild encounters: a head tilt, a lowering of the chest, a step back to create space. The simplest interpretation is that scent is a trigger, a biochemical key that changes the animal's state. Sound is the second shard. Audio analysts who have spent years cleaning up night recordings picked up a consistent pattern when childlike vocalizations are present. High-frequency notes, laughter, shrieks. Certain cries don't prompt the same response as adult voices. Instead of alarm calls or aggressive contact calls, the animals produce softer, harmonic tones. The cadence shifts, calls soften, intervals lengthen, and what researchers describe as non-contact tones appear. In a few rare recordings, an answering trill seems to match the pitch of a child's laugh, almost like a response meant to soothe. Eyewitnesses corroborate this when a child cries in the woods. Experienced trackers advise against loud rescue attempts because, paradoxically, the creature often approaches to investigate and then withdraws once the child's vocal pattern settles. Acoustic sensitivity to juvenile range frequencies looks like a second biological mechanism layered on top of smell. Third is culture, human and otherwise. Indigenous elders from distant regions, interviewed by anthropologists over decades, tell stories that at first glance read like myth: forest beings that leave markers, clear bedding, or little trails leading lost children back to camp. But when you listen closely, these narratives repeat the same functional detail: the forest beings respect the young. Elders explain rituals and gestures used to show non-threat and to call for protection. Anthropologists who have lived in communities where these stories circulate say they are not childish superstitions, but encoded knowledge. Practical protocols passed down because they worked. That's important because it suggests the human side of this relationship. People watched, learned, adapted gestures and offerings that seemed to keep the peace. And if human communities were tuning their behavior around whatever the animals were doing, it's likely the animals were, in turn, learning social patterns of their own. There are direct notes that bridge biology and culture. Field logs from long-term trackers describe repeated patterns that look like teaching. Older animals guiding young away from direct contact with human infants, consistent placement of prints that form a shield, and even small, cleared spaces like animal-made cradles. Those logs aren't folklore, they are operational records, sometimes handwritten, sometimes recorded on tape. Put the scent sensitivity, the acoustic responses, and the social learning together, and you have what looks very much like a dual-system biology, recognizing juveniles and a learned, enforced behavior that makes that recognition matter. Now, complicating everything is human interference. For decades, private teams and a few government-linked programs probed this phenomenon with simulated sense and playback experiments. Leaked notes from retired technicians, described deployments of juvenile scent simulants and child voice recordings designed to provoke a response. The results, according to those same notes, were predictable. Animals shifted into pacified modes or maintained distance. In some cases, those tests were followed by recommendations for further study. In others, the data were quietly shelved, labeled non-actionable, or classified for reasons ranging from safety to institutional liability. A handful of researchers who tried to publish were discouraged or worse, had samples and tapes requisitioned. That pattern of suppression is a fact in itself. The phenomenon has been taken seriously enough to be contained. None of these pieces proves the rule on its own, but together they form a demanding set of facts. Scent chemistry supplies a biochemical trigger. Acoustic analysis shows a specific frequency response. Cultural records reveal human adaptation and animal social learning. The shadow of classified research and restricted archives explains why most of the decisive evidence never reached public light. With that groundwork laid, it is time to reveal what the rule actually appears to be, how it is enacted in the field, and why both nature and culture seem to enforce it. Now we can say it plainly. The pattern is not superstition or luck. The evidence points to a two-part rule, a built-in recognition system backed by learned social behavior. Call it the juvenile non-aggression protocol. It is triggered by a combination of scent and sound, and once activated, it guides the creature's actions in clear, repeatable ways. That is why, across cultures and decades, children are almost always left unharmed. Start with the biology. Multiple independent tissue assays and environmental samples point to heightened sensitivity in the olfactory system. These are not dramatic, mystical organs. They have the same kind of smell receptors you'd expect in an animal that depends on scent to read its world. What is different is what those receptors pick up. The chemical profiles associated with infant humans, a mix of volatile organic compounds, skin microbiome signals, sweat markers appear to register on those receptors as a unique, juvenile signature. When a Bigfoot-like individual detects that signature, a cascade of responses begins. The animal's breathing pattern changes. Its muscles relax. Posture lowers. Vocal output shifts toward softer, more harmonic tones. In field recordings and laboratory analogs, that cascade looks like pacification, curiosity instead of aggression, approach followed by withdrawal or deliberate positioning between a child and perceived danger. Sound complements scent. Acoustic analysis of many encounters shows consistent changes whenever high-pitched human vocalizations are present. The creatures do not ignore childlike sounds. They respond to them. High-frequency laughter, cries, and screams seem to trigger a different channel in the animal's auditory processing. Not alarm, but recognition. Researchers working with playback experiments reported that child's voice recordings produced subdued, almost conciliatory calls in response. Witnesses describe the animals modulating their voices as if to soothe, and sometimes emitting tonal patterns that match nothing known from local wildlife. The combined input, smell, and sound together raises the likelihood that the animal will treat a juvenile as outside the normal sphere of threat or prey. That biological trigger alone would be interesting. What makes a protocol striking, and what lifts it out of the realm of simple reflex, is the social learning layered on top of it. Repeated eyewitness descriptions show behavior that is organized, repeatable, and directional in ways biology alone does not explain. Tracks forming a semicircular barrier. Foliage arranged to create a small, sheltered space near where a child is found. Animals stationing themselves between the child and curious adults, or guiding lost children back toward human trails. These are not random acts of avoidance. They are patterns that imply teaching, imitation, and communal enforcement. Indigenous oral histories provide the human side of that equation. Across regions, elders speak of forest beings that know the smallest among us and act to protect them. Those stories are not all identical, but they share motifs. Markers placed near lost children, sleep clearings, or the appearance of a silent guardian at the edge of a camp. Anthropologists who have listened carefully find a consistent thread. Human communities recognized a reliable behavior and adapted to it. In some places, ritualized gestures and small offerings were developed to acknowledge the creature's presence and to signal non-threatening intent, essentially formalizing a cross-species understanding. Put biology and social learning together, and you have a durable system. The animal recognizes juvenile signatures and responds with a pacifying reflex. The group then reinforces that response through learned behaviors passed from one generation to the next. Young animals observe adults leaving space, building barriers with prints, and responding gently to certain sounds, then copy those actions. Over time, what began as a sensory reaction becomes a social rule. Do not harm juveniles. Maintain a protective perimeter. Intervene in non-confrontational ways. This model answers some hard questions. Why are children spared, even in encounters where adults are watched or confronted? Because juveniles trigger a specific, prioritized response. Why do some reports describe apparent rescue behavior, a child led back, or a safe place left at the edge of a camp? Because learned patterns emphasize preservation and the maintenance of boundaries. And why is data so often scarce or redacted? Because once institutions understood the predictability of the response and the potential to test it with scent simulants and playback, a bureaucratic debate began about ethics, safety, and control. Leaked technician notes and a handful of whistleblower reports confirmed that controlled provocations produced the expected pacifying results, which only intensified institutional interest and, in some cases, suppression. There is a moral and practical consequence to this revelation. This is not accidental kindness on the part of an unknown beast. It is a repeatable, communicable strategy that affects how we must behave. The protocol creates a fragile bridge between human infants and an otherwise opaque, wild intelligence. It can be respected, and so it protects. It can also be confused or violated by panicked adults, unethical experiments, or thoughtless publicity. And those violations are precisely when danger and cover-up follow. Understanding the rule, biological recognition reinforced by social enforcement, is the central promise of this investigation. It explains the pattern that ordinary accounts and sensational headlines miss. It also sets the stage for the next vital part: how to act when the protocol is in effect, how to read its signs in the field, and what single mistake can turn protection into peril. That guidance is not theoretical. It is practical, built on recorded encounters and the cautious notes of those who have watched this phenomenon closely. Knowing the rule changes everything you should do when a child is at the center of an unexplained encounter. Now that we've named the rule, here is the part that can save lives: how the protocol actually behaves in the field, how to recognize it, and the single fatal mistake you must never make. This is not speculation. It's distilled from decades of field notes, survivor testimony, and the cautious recommendations of elders and trackers who have lived with this pattern long before cameras arrived. First, read the environment. When the juvenile protocol is active, it has a very particular signature. Tracks often arrive in a crescent or near circular pattern, as if to mark off a perimeter. You may find foliage laid flat in neat patches, small clearings that look almost like bedding, or the impression of a narrow path left deliberately open. Vocalizations change. Instead of distant, aggressive howls, you hear muted, harmonic tones, soft grunts, or low-frequency hums that seem to muffle the night. In many accounts, the animals place themselves between the child and the rest of the world, or stationed at the edge of the perimeter, as if holding a guard. These are the signs of enforcement, not of predation. Second, the one mistake that converts protection into peril is panic. More precisely, frantic recovery behavior that mimics juvenile distress or that rushes into the perimeter. Witnesses repeatedly describe the same chain of events. A child is found or left near a camp. The animals establish a boundary, and adults overcome with fear charge and shouting, waving, or emitting high-pitched calls. Those adult behaviors confuse and sometimes provoke the creatures. The animals respond not to the child but to the perceived aggressive intruder. The protection collapses. Adults are put at risk, and in many reports, evidence disappears amid chaotic attempts to rescue or to document. The protocol is fragile. It depends on human restraint. Third, what to do if you suspect a child is within a protected perimeter. The steps are simple, repeatable, and proven in recorded encounters. Stop and lower your voice. High-frequency noise attracts attention. Calm, low speech is interpreted differently. Breathe and think of the child's safety first, not your need to act quickly. Panicked movement is the worst possible signal. Signal with low-frequency tones. Use a whistle or a device that produces a deep, steady sound, or speak in a slow, low register. Witnesses and acoustic analyses show these tones are less likely to trigger defensive behavior than shrill cries or electronic beeps mimicking children. Approach slowly and on a wide arc, not directly toward the clearing. Give the perimeter space to collapse naturally. In many successful recoveries, adults circled wide and let an animal withdraw on its own, after which the child was moved quietly. Do not take the child and run. Rapid removal can be interpreted as abduction or escape and may provoke pursuit. Instead, once the animal has withdrawn, pick up the child calmly, cover them if needed, and back away slowly on the same wide arc. Fourth, preserve evidence and protocol. Photograph tracks and shelters from a safe distance, record audio without crossing the perimeter, and log GPS coordinates. Do not attempt scent experiments, playback, or any action designed to test the response. Private programs that ran such provocations produced pacifying responses. Yes, but they also created risk, injury, and a wave of suppression. Ethical containment matters. If you are a researcher, get community consent, institutional oversight, and emergency medical support before any controlled study. If you are a parent or a hiker, avoid replicating juvenile Kuzno toys that squeak, no baby monitors blaring, no sudden electronic noises, Fifth, involve local knowledge first. Indigenous elders, longtime hunters, and experienced trackers are often the best first contacts. They carry culturally learned signals and local protocols, simple gestures, offerings, or phrases that reduce misunderstanding. Many successful recoveries were coordinated by people who knew these customs. If you capture media, make independent copies and give trusted local experts a chance to advise before posting raw footage online. Many whistleblowers describe how agencies sometimes seize or redact material. Having independent witnesses and copies protects both the evidence and the child. Sixth, community preparedness reduces danger. If you live or travel where these behaviors are reported, train families to keep children close, teach them to freeze if separated, and practice low-tone signaling. Equip groups with low-frequency whistles and a clear plan. Locate local contacts, set rendezvous points, and agree that no one charges into a suspected perimeter. A community that respects the rule preserves it. Seventh, for journalists and documentarians, a warning. This is not a story to sensationalize. Attempts to weaponize juvenile cues, to stage encounters, or to monetize child-focused footage have led to suppression, legal pressure, and, worst of all, harm to people. Responsible reporting means consulting indigenous knowledge holders, independent biologists, and legal counsel before revealing sensitive data. Finally, understand the deeper moral point. The Juvenile Non-Aggression Protocol is a fragile bridge between human communities and a wild intelligence. It has been preserved by biological sensitivity and by learned behavior on both sides. We are not entitled to test or exploit it. When we move with respect, quiet, patient, informed, we can often recover children safely and learn more about the rule without endangering anyone. When we panic, mimic, or monetize, we break that bridge. This is not just a set of rules. It is a call to restraint, to prioritize calm over spectacle, community over curiosity, and careful documentation over viral proof. The forest has a code. If we follow it, the most vulnerable among us will remain protected. If we don't, the protection may vanish hand with it, the chance to understand a behavior that has kept children safe for generations. If what we've uncovered so far is true, then the next and most urgent question is simple. What do you actually do when the rule is active? This block is a practical map, not superstition, but a set of field-tested behaviors and community practices that preserve the protective dynamic and keep adults from becoming the reason it fails. Start with prevention. In areas where these behaviors are reported, treat children as the highest priority safety asset. Keep them within arm's reach in dense woods and teach a single, simple response if they become separated. Freeze where you are. Make no sudden movements and answer only to calm, low voices. Practice this until it becomes automatic. Give every child a low-frequency whistle, one that produces a deep, steady tone, not a shrill shriek, and instruct them to use it only if they cannot see an adult and feel truly afraid. Low tones are less likely to mimic juvenile distress and more likely to fit into the pacifying acoustic window the animals seem to respect. Next, detection. Learn the signs that a juvenile protocol may be in place. Large, deliberate prints arranged in a semicircle. A small, cleared niche of leaves or softened ground where a child might be sheltered. Soft, harmonic calls at dusk rather than sharp, territorial screams. These are cues that something is protecting the juvenile perimeter. If you see these signs, slow down, do not charge or shout. Observe from a distance, mark the location, and switch your mindset from rescue sprint to controlled retrieval. Retrieval is counterintuitive. The instinct to run toward a missing child is strong, but in these contexts, it can escalate danger. Follow a calm stepwise method. Stop, breathe, lower your voice. Panic travels faster than footsteps. Announce yourself with a low, steady tone. Use a deep whistle or a soft, low-pitched call, not high-pitched crying or mock-it sounds. Approach on a wide, sweeping arc rather than directly into a suspected perimeter. Giving space allows the animal to withdraw without feeling boxed in. Move slowly and deliberately. Keep your hands visible but relaxed. Sudden gestures read as threats. If you find a child, do not scoop and run. Speak softly, reassure them, and back away together on a path that avoids the central cleared area. Let the animal have a clear line to leave. Evidence preservation matters for both safety and future understanding. Photograph tracks, the arrangement of leaves, and any sheltering signs from a safe distance using zoom. Tag the GPS coordinates. Record ambient audio, but do so without getting closer. Do not touch or dismantle potential shelters if a child may still be nearby. Disturbance can provoke a response and destroys data that could explain what happened. Keep a log, names, times, weather, and any human actions you took. These small details are the difference between a useful report and nothing at all. Reporting is a delicate, critical step. The people best placed to advise and respond are local, indigenous elders. experienced trackers, and established independent researchers who understand the local patterns and cultural context. Contact them first, or simultaneously with authorities. Make independent backups of any media before sharing. If an agency asks to seize footage or devices, request written inventory and notify a trusted independent researcher. Whistleblowers and retired technicians have repeatedly told us that material seized without documentation often disappears into research silos. Duplicates protect both evidence and the child's privacy. For communities, build simple protocols now. Create rendezvous points, teach standardized load tone signals, and keep a short emergency contact list that prioritizes local experts. Hold quarterly drills for families using realistic scenarios, separation, finding odd clearings, discovering tracks. Equip community members with low-frequency whistles and teach them to resist the urge to rush in. A community that rehearses calm makes calm habitual, and habit protects children. Researchers and documentarians must exercise the highest ethical restraint. Do not experiment with juvenile scent simulants or playback of childlike vocalizations without formal ethical oversight. Informed consent from local communities, and robust safety plans. Past attempts to provoke responses have led to confiscated evidence and, in at least one case, injury. If you are studying this phenomenon, collaborate with indigenous knowledge holders and independent biologists. Register your protocols with an ethics board and make provisions for the well-being of both people and animals in the study area. Finally, a warning about the single life-saving mistake: do not mimic juvenile distress. Loud, high-pitched shouting, frantic childlike cries, or the use of toys and electronics that reproduce those frequencies, or the behaviors most likely to upset the protective dynamic and draw attention toward an adult source. This era converts a protective perimeter into a contested space. The rule protects children. It does not protect adults who behave like threats. These measures are not arcane rituals. They are practical adaptations, simple habits built from repeated outcomes, designed to preserve a fragile bridge between human communities and a wild intelligence. When we act with restraint and respect, most accounts end with children returned safe and with data that helps us learn. When we panic, mimic, or monetize, the protection phrase and evidence vanishes. If you leave the forest with one clear instruction, let it be this: move slowly, speak low, and prioritize community wisdom over spectacle. The code in the woods is fragile but real. Follow it, and the smallest among us remain protected. Break it, and we may lose more than a mystery. We may lose a safeguard that generations have quietly relied upon. We began with a pattern, an uncomfortable anomaly in the lore of a creature usually framed as a threat, and followed it through the kinds of evidence people too often dismiss as anecdote. The trail led from tribal firesides to hand-scrawled field notes, from hair samples with odd chemistry to recordings where the calls change when a child cries. What comes into focus is not myth alone but a working system, a juvenile non-aggression protocol that mixes biology and culture. And that demands a human response more careful than curiosity or bravado. That discovery matters because it reframes every frightening story we've ever heard. Bigfoot is not simply a danger to be feared at all hours. In many documented cases, it plays a role that looks a lot like protection: scent receptors tuned to the chemistry of young human skin, an ability to parse high-frequency vocal patterns, and socially learned behaviors passed among individuals all converge to create a buffer around children. When that buffer is honored, most accounts end with a child found safe, confused, maybe soothed. When humans break the unwritten rules, by panicking, by imitating juvenile screams, by chasing the situation can flip in minutes, turning a protective perimeter into a contested space. This is urgent because ignorance can be lethal. Panicked retrievals and theatrical rescues do more than spook the animals. They change the dynamic and put adults in harm's way. They also erase evidence, the parts of the story that would help us understand the rule better. Clear audio, undisturbed tracks, reliable lab samples are the same parts that vanish when people rush toward a child or when outside researchers try to weaponize the phenomenon. Institutions with resources have sometimes reacted the same way, sealing files, classifying recordings, or quietly removing material from the public record. That secrecy has a cost. It slows community learning, and it increases the chances that someone will make the single life-saving mistake we keep warning about: mimicking juvenile distress. So what should you do if you live in, travel through, or study areas where these behaviors are reported? First, act with restraint. Keep children close and teach them to stay still if separated. Make low.com sounds rather than high-pitched shouts. Carry a low-frequency whistle and train older children to use it only in true emergencies. If a child goes missing, stop. Breathe. Speak softly. Move slowly along a wide arc rather than charging into a suspected perimeter. Use a low, steady call to announce your presence and back away if you detect harmonic, pacifying tones in the distance. Second, document carefully. Photograph tracks and shelters from afar. Record audio without approaching. Log GPS coordinates and preserve an independent copy of any media. Do not post raw, unverified footage immediately. Contact local indigenous knowledge holders and independent researchers first. They offer context, cultural protocols, and practical wisdom shaped by generations of experience. If authorities request material, note every request and maintain at least one secure backup. Transparency with trusted parties protects both the child and the integrity of the evidence. Third, if you are a researcher, operate with the highest ethical standards. Do not deploy juvenile scent simulants or play back childlike sounds without formal oversight. Informed consent from local communities and robust safety plans. Past experiments have provoked predictable reactions and sometimes produced dangerous outcomes, and in at least one reported case, injury. Collaborate with indigenous elders, independent biologists, and certified ethics boards. Treat both human subjects and the animals with respect. The desire for answers does not justify recklessness. Fourth, build community protocols. Communities that rehearse calm, who keep emergency contact lists that prioritize local trackers and elders, and who teach low-sound signaling greatly reduce risk. Create a registry of trained responders who know the local patterns and who can move in when a child needs recovery. Share knowledge responsibly. Encourage training workshops and drills rather than sensational videos. Finally, be aware that interest from powerful organizations can complicate things. Whistleblowers have described attempts to decode the juvenile recognition system for security uses, and that has sometimes led to evidence being suppressed or to pressure on our witnesses to stay quiet. If you encounter suspicious requests for confiscation, seek legal counsel and notify independent researchers. Preserve copies, protect the child first, protect the story second. The pattern we have uncovered is not a sentimental comfort. It is a practical, observable rule with real effects. Respecting it has saved children. Violating it has endangered adults and destroyed data that might have led to clearer answers. The road forward is not secrecy or exploitation, but careful documentation, community training, and ethical research done in collaboration with the people who have lived alongside these woods the longest. If you leave this with one clear instruction, let it be this: move slowly, speak low, and prioritize community wisdom over spectacle. There is a code in the woods older than our fears, and when we listen to it, the smallest among us are kept safe. The truth is out there, and for once, it may be protecting us. What comes next matters more than ever. We've laid out the rule, shown how it works, and explained the single deadly mistake adults make. Now Block 8 is about what you do with that knowledge, how communities can turn revelation into protection, how witnesses can safeguard children and preserve evidence, and how ordinary people can push back against secrecy and exploitation without making the woods more dangerous. First, prioritize the child. Always. When a child goes missing or is found near strange signs, speed is less important than calm. Slow, steady movement and low tones protect adults. They keep the protective protocol intact. Never hand a child's image or identity to a crowd. Do not post raw video of a child in an encounter. The immediate job is safety, privacy, and containment, not clicks or money. Second, practical evidence handling. Photograph tracks, clearings, and shelters from a safe distance. Record audio without moving into the perimeter. Capture GPS coordinates and timestamp media. Make 2 copies of every file, one sealed and one for trusted experts. If an agency asks to seize material, insist on a written receipt and demand copies before anything is removed. If possible, notify an independent researcher or a legal advisor who understands chain of custody and privacy rights. These steps preserve the story without exposing the child or enabling misuse. Third, build local networks. Communities that treat this as a shared risk and shared responsibility are the ones that keep children safe.